Hi everyone, it's John. Welcome back to my channel, and I have another book review for you today. I read, as one of the other sort of fictional reprieves to break up my history reading, something I found relatively recently at my little library annex, and had never, an author I've never read before, so I thought, why not? It's all of 100 pages, and I've always wanted to read H.G. Wells, so why not read The Island of Dr. Moreau? Like I said, completely new to Wells, and I picked this up and wanted to share my thoughts. So, The Island of Dr. Moreau was published in 1896, quickly on the back of the Time Machine. And while the latter explores sort of the increasingly wondrous possibilities brought on by ever-advancing science, the Island of Dr. Moreau looks at, well, was accused of being blasphemous when it came out, in its willingness to question what at its most fundamental level humanity is. And despite being over 125 years old, it still raises some really fascinating questions about bioethics, morality, religion, and lots of other things too. So, I usually try to give some synopsis. It might be or may not be more than you want. So, if you're interested in reading it anytime soon, and don't want too many plot points, I will say stop here, and I would recommend that you go on and read it. It won't be a horrible review, I promise. So you have this guy. His name is Edward Prendick. He is shipwrecked somewhere that's in the South Pacific. He's rescued by someone else named Montgomery and his servant. Montgomery's servant on a ship where the two are transporting a wide array of exotic animals for reasons we don't really know yet. And after increasing suspicions that something is amiss, like hearing weird animal noises from distant parts of the ship, Prendick learns that, or he suspects that something might be going on. And they eventually land on this island, and there he learns that the mastermind behind the whole island is Dr. Moreau. He is sort of commandeered it for his scientific experimentation. And Dr. Moreau is a scientist who has been ostracized by his community in England for what they consider to be morally horrifying attempts at vivisection, as well as human and animal experimentation. So they send him off to the South Pacific to get them the hell away from civilized society. One day, Prendick is driven into the island's jungle by these horrifying sounds, which he started hearing on the ship, which he starts to suspect are animals that Moreau is experimenting on. And he comes across this group of man-pig hybrids. He asks Montgomery, who is sort of like Moreau's assistant. He lives there with him. Again, he has this sidekick himself. He asks Montgomery what's going on, and Montgomery kind of coyly suggests that everything is fine, and then gives him an elixir that puts him to sleep. He wakes up the next day, still terrified, still paranoid. Paranoid even maybe that he might be among Moreau's next victims. He flees into the jungle again. This whole theme of the jungle being a symbol for the unknown, obvious sort of connection there, where he meets even more hybrid animals, including an ape man and a sloth man, who chant the religious dicta that Dr. Moreau has presumably taught them, including to not go about on all fours, not to eat fish or flesh, not to claw the bark of trees, and not to chase men, for these are all inhumane things. And they ask, sort of incantatorily, are we not men? Are we not men? Are we not men? Prendick and Moreau sit down and have a detailed and rather awkward discussion about the history of why Moreau does what he does. And this conversation is, for me, at least one of the highlights of the book. Moreau he tells Prendick that he has spent years on the island trying to transform animals into humans. Not just physiologically, but also psychologically and morally, including programming them with that sort of primitive religious understanding or religious practice, the chanting. The question of pain comes up, which has been obviously on Prendick's mind since he hears screams of terror emanating from Moreau's victims. And Moreau explains that he sees this pain as necessary, but ultimately avoidable once his creations, which he deems them his creations, achieve full humanity. Moreau's character becomes darker and darker when the creatures on the island that he has crafted, shaped, formed, start to stray from their ideal behavior. And this is another interesting aspect of the novel. It's discovered that there is a leopard-man hybrid living on the island who has broken a rule, one of those religious orders again, and he's eaten a rabbit. And instead of seeing him taken back to Moreau's lab for sure punishment, which would probably involve a lot of pain, Prendick decides to kill him, to put him out of his misery so he won't have to endure that pain. And after a good deal more conflict between what are referred to as the beast folk, all of these hybrid man-human animals, and Moreau's coercive civilizing force, shades of colonialism and imperialism, but whatever, I won't touch on that aspect too much here. Prendick finally spots a lifeboat which he uses to escape the island and to get back to England. And upon returning home, he has an uneasiness, a very understandable uneasiness around all people, forever now more attuned to the tenuous line that separates humans from the rest of the animals. So like I said at the top of the review, this is my first foray into H.G. Wells in a year that has been full of not great reading experiences. This was nice to find one that succeeded my average expectations. Haven't read a lot of science and fiction in the past. I don't really know if people would consider this science fiction by today's standards, but he certainly is considered one of the progenitors of science fiction. I thought maybe, a classic of the genre might help me sort of edge into it a little bit more. The writing can be a little bit choppy. It can be a little bit episodic. The chapters are extremely short, maybe just a few pages each, and they take you from episode to episode to episode in a kind of disjointed way. But he wrote this when he was 28, 29 years old, and it's clearly indicative of a writer who's still trying to carve out his own style. Like I said, a lot of the action jumps from one scene to another, like between the hunting scenes meant to evoke, obviously, thrill and excitement, and the conversation with Dr. Moreau, which has a more thoughtful, philosophical tone. nevertheless, I thought this was a really fantastic place to start to sort of jump into Wells's work. And the ideas he discusses make me more interested in reading other things he's written. So I ended up giving this 4 stars on Goodreads. A pretty good overall experience, I would say. My first impressions of The Island of Dr. Moreau by H.G. Wells. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, things you think I should know, let me know down below. And I will see you soon.